Leo Tolstoy is best known as the author of War and Peace, a writer of extraordinary scope and influence, but his impact reaches beyond literature. Over the course of his life, he engaged deeply with questions about purpose, ethics, and how to live honestly in a complex and often contradictory world. His work spans novels, short stories, diaries, and spiritual reflections. Beneath this body of work is a persistent search for clarity and moral direction, a search which shaped not only his writing, but the trajectory of his entire life. Born in 1828 at the family estate of Yasnaya Polyana, Tolstoy came from the Russian nobility, wealthy, educated, and steeped in the traditions of Imperial Russia. His early years, however, were marked by loss. His mother died before he turned 2, and his father passed away when he was 9. By the age of 16, he had lost all of the relatives who had taken over his care. As a child, he was introspective and deeply sensitive, traits which would shape both his literary voice and his evolving worldview. One of his earliest and most enduring memories came from a story told by his older brother Nikolai. Buried somewhere in the old Zakaz forest on the family estate was a little green stick, and inscribed on the stick was the secret to universal happiness. Though fantastical, the idea of the little green stick lingered in Tolstoy's soul for decades as a metaphor for the hidden truths he would pursue throughout his life. Tolstoy wrote, "I believed that there was a little green stick whereon was written something which would destroy all evil in men and give them great blessings. So now I believe that such truth exists among people and will be revealed to them and will give them what it promises." At 16, Tolstoy entered the University of Kazan to study law and Oriental languages. Yet despite his initial enthusiasm, he found the uniformity draining to his personality and intelligence, and he quickly became bored of the classes and disappointed by the competence of his lecturers. His teachers labelled him as both unable and unwilling to learn, and the seeds of Tolstoy's contempt for authority and uniformity were sown. He found himself drawn into the temptations and shallow pleasures of gambling, sex, and drinking, and left university without a degree, returning to the family estate burdened by remorse and debt. In 1851, he joined the army and was stationed in the Caucasus, later fighting in the Crimean War. These years were formative. He began writing short stories, many of them drawn from his own experiences. His early fiction, childhood, boyhood, and youth, were semi-autobiographical and widely praised. Military life also exposed him to the harsh realities of war. His observations led to a deep disillusionment with violence, authority, and nationalism. "In all history," he wrote, "there is no war which was not hatched by the governments." This early skepticism would later become central to his moral philosophy. After the war, Tolstoy returned to Yasnaya Polyana, where he married Sophia Bears and began work on what would become his most famous novels, War and Peace and Anna Karenina. These works were groundbreaking in their psychological depth and moral complexity. Rather than portraying heroes or villains, they examined the internal lives of ordinary people, their contradictions, beliefs, and daily concerns. However, despite his literary success, Tolstoy became increasingly troubled by a growing sense of emptiness. Material comfort and critical acclaim did not resolve the deeper questions that preoccupied him. In his 50s, Tolstoy entered a profound existential crisis. Although his outer life appeared settled, with wealth, family, and creative success, he was consumed by a question: what will come of what I am doing today or shall do tomorrow? What will come of my entire life? He searched for answers in science, philosophy, and theology, but none proved sufficient. At one point, he considered ending his life. What ultimately prevented this was the quiet example of people around him, peasants and workers who seemed to live with a kind of dignity and purpose that he could not explain. This realization marked a turning point. He began to believe that moral and spiritual truths could be found in the simplicity of lived experience, not in theory or institutions. He turned away from the privileges of his class, renounced private property, and embraced a radical form of Christian ethics, emphasizing humility, compassion, and non-violence. Malcolm Muggeridge, author of Time and Eternity, wrote of Tolstoy, "Underlying the disappointed hopes was his faith in a single infallible guide, a universal spirit that lives in men as a whole and in each one of us, that commands the tree to grow towards the sun, the flower to throw off its seed in autumn, and us to reach out towards God, and by doing so become united to each other." His later writings reflect this transformation. In a confession, he traced his spiritual crisis and its resolution. In The Kingdom of God is Within You, he outlined a sweeping critique of organized religion, state power, and coercion. He advocated for pacifism, simple living, and moral responsibility. His ideas were controversial, eventually leading to his excommunication by the Russian Orthodox Church in 1901. Despite this, his influence spread internationally. His correspondence with one Mahatma Gandhi helped shape the foundations of non-violent resistance. His moral writings later inspired figures such as Martin Luther King Jr., who credited Tolstoy with providing a moral framework for peaceful protest. By the end of his life, he was regarded not only as a novelist, but also as a moral philosopher and social reformer. And yet, the ideals Tolstoy preached often clashed with the reality of his own life. His relationship with his wife Sophia, once close, became increasingly strained. She had supported his work and raised their children, but struggled with his rejection of wealth and with the intensity of his spiritual pursuits. Tolstoy, for his part, remained torn between his public beliefs and private obligations. He wished to surrender the rights to his works but was constrained by legal and familial concerns. He condemned privilege but lived much of his life surrounded by it. In his final years, the tension became too great. At the age of 82, he quietly left his home, hoping to live out his remaining days in solitude and simplicity. He fell ill shortly after and died at a remote train station in 1910. Tolstoy's life was full of contradictions. He was both a moral idealist and a man of deep personal flaws, a critic of authority who remained, to some extent, a figure of influence, a seeker of simplicity who never fully escaped the complexities of his own position. Rather than offering clear answers, his work asks enduring questions. How should one live? What is worth striving for? What does it mean to be good? His search for meaning was dynamic and sincere. It was a lifelong process, always courageous, always open to growth, and in that, his legacy endures, not as a rigid model to follow, but as a life that illuminates the powers of reflection, conscience, and the courage to transform oneself. 2 years before his death, Tolstoy dictated to his secretary Nikolai Gusiev the following: "Although it is a trifling matter, I wish to say something that I should like done after my death. Let no ceremonies be performed in putting my body into the earth, a wooden coffin, and whoever wishes, carry it or cart it to Zakaz, opposite the ravine at the place of the green stick. At least there's a reason for selecting that and no other place." When Tolstoy mentioned the green stick, Gusiev observed that tears filled his eyes.